Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome. Today's topic is Resalest Remarkable Books 34. The first book today is Read to Me, Raising Kids Who Love to Read by Bernice E. Cullinan, 1992. Well, this is a very important topic if you're someone like me, if you're hoping that children can become readers, love reading books, and it's so anyway, that's what this book's about. It's mostly about getting younger kids into reading, not teenagers. So that was, my challenge as a high school teacher. Once kids get to high school, if they hate books, it's pretty tough to change that attitude. But if you start early on, it's actually pretty easy. If you start with Dr. Seuss when they're very young and these very simple books, and as they get older, progress to more difficult reading, and you're reading out loud to them, and they find books they can develop a positive attitude about books from a young age, and even though regardless of what happens to them in school, with their experiences there. The next book is The Whole 10 Yards by Frank Gifford and Harry Waters, 1994. Oh, this is a tremendous book. Really enjoyed it. It's about this fellow, Frank Gifford, who was an NFL star in the 1950s with the New York Giants. And later, of course, I knew him from the 1970s when he was part of the three guys on Monday Night Football with Don Meredith and Howard Cosell. So he talks about his life, interesting life, the people that he knew. Tom Landry, I think, was his coach. Vince Lombardi, Y.A. Tittle, the famous quarterback for the New York Giants. What a name, Y.A. Tittle, the famous photograph of him when he'd been sacked, I think, in the end zone. He was sitting on his knees, and his helmet had been knocked off, and there was blood dripping down his face. Kyle Rote, and of course Kathy Lee Gifford, who's now famous. Actually, Frank Gifford, I believe, died, but Kathy Lee is still alive. She's on TV. Good guy, Frank Gifford. During the Monday Night Football games, Howard Cosell was sort of brash and opinionated, and Don Meredith was a very kind of funny guy, and then Gifford would be the guy calling the game. And you get from this book is what a tremendous star he was in the 1950s himself as a player. The next book is They Call Me Dirty by Conrad Dobler and Vic Carucci, 1988. Well, according to this book, it's considered, quote, the most outrageous football book ever by the most offensive lineman in NFL history. Well, I was reading these in the Philippines, too, because I couldn't watch NFL games on TV back then. And he's a 1970s star player. Interesting, it says he was an offensive lineman. And talks about guys like Archie Manning, father of Peyton and Eli Manning, Joe Ferguson, who was a quarterback, Dan Deerdorf, who later became a famous commentator, and the teams he played for, the St. Louis Cardinals, Buffalo Bills, New Orleans Saints, one of his coaches, Chuck Knox, and Roger Staubach. Interesting book. The next book is The Fighting Ground by Avi, 1984. This author has just one name, this three-letter name, Avi. Interesting. I read this out loud to our son, Tim. It's an outstanding children's book set in 1778 during the American Revolution. 13-year-old Jonathan, the main character, wants to be a soldier, and he does for a day, and it's a nightmare, not the adventure he dreamed of. So, yeah, that's a lot of people, there's a tendency to romanticize war, and, of course, young men have this desire to prove themselves as heroes, and then what men go through in war is really, really tough. And this boy learned for himself. The next book is All Madden. Hey, I'm Talking Pro Football by John Madden with Dave Anderson, 1996. Oh, John Madden is a wonderful person. He actually played, I think, briefly, and I think he was on the 1960 Philadelphia Eagles that won the NFL championship. But then he became famous as the head coach for the Oakland Raiders in the 1970s, and actually even more famous later, I think, as an NFL TV guy announcing games. And I think he also has these these video games, all Madden. So great stories about guys that he knew, like Pat Summerall, that would be another announcer. Troy Aikman, Jimmy Johnson, Tom Landry. The Immaculate Reception, when in the playoff, it was a playoff game. When the Steelers beat the Raiders on this pass by Terry Bradshaw that Franco Harris caught after it had been bounced. Another guy had hit it. So that was, and of course, the Raiders thought they had that game won, but they lost. Tough game for them. And the interesting thing is John Madden, good guy, real good guy, smart guy, but real funny, kind, and he developed a fear of flying, and so and as he had this long career as a TV announcer. So he eventually had his own bus. He hired a driver and a cook, and he had a bed and a TV in a kitchen, and he would drive around the country instead of flying from place to place, he drove on this bus. So that was a pretty good story. I thought that was like he had the ideal life, He didn't have to drive, and then he would announce these games, Monday Night Football and so forth. The next book is Brian Piccolo, A Short Season by Jeannie Morris, 1971. This book captured, as you can see, I was really into the NFL books topic or trend at the time. That's why I'm wearing a Cleveland Browns shirt doing this talk. And it reminded me, because as a boy, they had this movie, Brian's Song, which came out when I was a kid, I think in 1972, and I remember the movie. And this is the story of this guy. He was Brian Piccolo, who played in the NFL. He was a running back, I believe, and he died at age 26 of cancer. Very, very tragic. He was full of life, and his very good friend on the Bears was Gale Sayers, who had a tremendous career. So, and Brian Piccolo just was kind of a scrappy guy who really worked real hard. And there's in the movie, they have him in training camp with the Bears singing, the rookies would have to sing their high school songs. I thought that was pretty. James Caan, I believe, was the actor who played him. Wonderful book. The next book is Rudy by James Ellison, 1993. What an incredible book. True story about this fellow. He was pint-sized, in other words, a small fellow, Rudy Rutiger from Joliet, Illinois. And he came from this blue-collar community, and he was Catholic, and if you were Catholic back then, and probably now, you'd root for Notre Dame. They were the favorite for Catholic Americans all over the country. And and Rudy had this dream of playing football for Notre Dame. So, and you'd think it was an impossible dream, but he didn't give up. He pursued his dream of being a student at Notre Dame and playing on the football team. He had many, many obstacles. He actually didn't get accepted. He had to, I think, go to a community college, and he did real well. And he finally was accepted at Notre Dame as a student, but not on the team. He spent 2 years on the practice team. And finally, as a senior, in the last game of the season, they said, okay, Rudy, you're going to play. So he wore a uniform for that game. And at the very end of the game, he entered for 3 plays. And he sacked the Georgia Tech quarterback on the final play. So isn't this something? His father, mother, brothers, friends, and the whole crowd started chanting, Rudy, Rudy, Rudy. Wonderful story. This is very inspiring. It shows you pursue your dreams, whatever they are, and you can achieve them. Because this guy, boy, it was a long shot, but the thing is, he didn't give up. He persevered, and he finally achieved his dream of playing for football for Notre Dame. Incredible story. The next book is Fasting as a Way of Life by Alan Cott, M.D., 1977. This book inspired me to fast for 1 week. But, it's always good to read the whole book before you start into anything. I hadn't done that. And it says that you should walk for 3 hours a day when you're fasting. And this would be like no food. And for your health, supposedly to clean out your intestines and especially where people tend to get this matter that accumulates, that leads to colon cancer. Anyway, it's It's a good thing. Fasting is a good thing. I think I'm in favor now of like having a fruit fast. Although I actually find it too hard now, but it is good for your health. Fasting is a very good healthy thing to do, and this book talks all about it. The next book is There Is No Joy in Gruntsville by Ron Hostetler and Jeff Hostetler, 1995. Wonderful book. Jeff Hostetler was the quarterback for the New York Giants when they won the 1990 Super Bowl. And he and his brother Ron, they wrote this book. And it's sort of a motivational book. They're encouraging the reader to keep going and pursue his or her dream. Don't give up. To pray, learn lessons that we need to learn, and turn trials into triumphs. So this is a true story of this fellow that he achieved his dreams, and he's encouraging the readers. This is a wonderful thing. We all should pursue our dreams and keep going. See, why not, right? The next book is The Best Christmas Pageant Ever by Barbara Robinson, 1972. This is a children's book. I read out loud to the Resalest students. And these, in the story, these poor, supposedly bad kids take over the Christmas pageant and make it special. It's a very touching book. It's down to earth or down home, and a very nice story. The next book is Slick, The Silver and Black Life of Al Davis by Mark Ribowski, 1991. Oh, a tremendous book. Al Davis was the longtime owner of the Oakland Raiders in the NFL, and he was a real renegade. He actually, he had been a coach, and he became the owner through suspicious means because he. As coach, he had a very generous owner who gave him some part ownership of the team, and then he started filing lawsuits against the owner, and through some hocus pocus, he became owner of the Oakland Raiders. It was very suspicious activity, and he was using through legal means, legal nonsense. Anyway, he eventually became owner of the of the Oakland Raiders, moved the team to Los Angeles after they'd had success in Oakland, and then they moved back to Oakland, and then there was forever speculation: was Al Davis going to move the team again? Now it looks like he's gone, he died, but his son, I believe, is moving the team to Las Vegas. So he had this. He was actually the AFL commissioner when there were two leagues, and when they joined, and of course they merged. And Davis was a longtime enemy of Pete Rozelle. Talks about John Madden, one of his coaches, Ken Stabler, the tremendous quarterback, Fred Biletnikoff, wonderful wide receiver, Marcus Allen, and Bo Jackson, and these who were fine running backs. He won 3 Super Bowls as owner of the team: 1977, 1980, and 1983. And actually, in the '80s Super Bowl, he defeated the Cleveland Browns, or the Raiders beat the Browns in the playoffs. But after that, they moved to Los Angeles, so that was pretty tough. Anyway, I wrote in my book diary, how often we are unaware of the pain of others. Browns fans were devastated losing that game, but even though the Raiders won the game and won the Super Bowl that year, they moved to Los Angeles, so that was really hard. The next book is Distant Replay by Jerry Kramer with Dick Schaap, 1985. This is a wonderful book. It's the story of the 1966 Green Bay Packers who won the first Super Bowl, and this is an 18-year reunion in 1984. So the different guys got together and met with the author, Bart Starr, who was the tremendous quarterback, Paul Hornung, who was the great running back. And here's a quote from the book. Quote, "We weren't just the champions of Super Bowl I. We were champions forever. Nobody wants to be Fuzzy Thurston anymore." That was his Fuzzy Thurston, who was a star. That's how famous. Fame is fleeting. He'd been famous and was forgotten, and he was feeling bad about it. "All the guys who found in Vince Lombardi the father figure they had never known at home. All the guys who learned to win in Green Bay after too many losing seasons in too many towns. People need people." So, wonderful book. That's an interesting point. Vince Lombardi was the coach. Now the Super Bowl trophy is called the Lombardi Trophy. He mentions how these guys, how they didn't have they found a father. He was like a father to them. These players, I guess, who maybe their fathers had died or weren't around. They didn't see them very much, or maybe they weren't good fathers. The next book is How Can I Help by Ram Dass with Paul Gorman, 1985. I thought this was a tremendous book. It was recommended by my friend John Maddox, friend from SRF. It gets into the whole dynamics of helping, which actually isn't as simple as you think about. The motivations for helping, the pitfalls, and he talks about just being together, how important that is if you're going to help somebody, being physically with them, and listening. Being a good listener, not judging, no superiority. See, this is where often people who think they're helping, like psychiatrists, or teachers, or anyone, parents, we should have respect for others. And when you think you're superior to a person, you're actually hurting them, in my opinion. And the best idea, the amazing idea, he says the best way to help another person is to enjoy being with them. That's a tremendous idea. And it's so true, because these people who think they're helping, actually, very often the people who think they're helping, they're just enjoying power, and they're not helping, they're actually hurting. A lot of psychiatrists do that. They think they're so great, and then they look down on the person, they have disdain. They don't respect them. They're hurting them. They think they're helping. They're not. So this is an important topic. Because we don't need to help each other, but really help. Respect and listen and accept people and encourage them and believe in them. The next book is Confessions of a Hero Worshipper by Stephen J. Dubner, 2003. This is a very interesting book. Wonderful. The guy's about my age. Back in the 70s, his father had died, the author, when he was a boy. And he was from Pittsburgh. And Franco Harris, who was the star running back of the Pittsburgh Steelers, became his hero. And like we call him a second father, someone he looked up to, since he didn't have a father. Now, years later, as an adult, the author, Stephen J. Dubner, he wanted to establish a friendship with Franco Harris, who remained in the Pittsburgh area. And he was able to do that because of this obsession. The interesting point was at one point he did become friends with him. Franco Harris was in the donut business, among other things. And one day they were in Franco Harris's home and watching TV, and Franco Harris fell asleep. And it's kind of an interesting, in a way, he got to know the reality of the person. Franco Harris is a good guy, but he got to know him. And it's a very interesting story. I can't imagine being able to do that, especially with a star player. I guess if you're persistent and if you're a good person, be patient, you could do it. The next book is The Complete Super Bowl Story, Games 1 to 22 by Richard J. Brenner, 1987. So these are the Super Bowls from 1966 to 1987. It talks about guys like Bart Starr, Joe Namath for the Jets, Terry Bradshaw for the Steelers, Ken Stabler for the Raiders, Joe Montana for the 49ers, John Elway with the Broncos, Phil Simms with the Giants, and Roger Staubach with the Dallas Cowboys. The next book is The Courage to Grieve, Creative Living, Recovery, and Growth Through Grief by Judy Tannenbaum, 1980. This is a very important topic, grief. I think I talked about this mentioned it in the video about death and dying. This deals with losing people. When people do die, we all go through this. We're all going to die, and we all know people who have died. And the older we get, the more people we know, and eventually we'll go. So this is an important topic to deal with, because it's a reality of life, and we should face reality. Very often we don't painful things we don't want to face, but we should. The next book is The Dark Side of the Game, My Life in the NFL by Tim Green, 1996. The author was an Atlanta Falcons cornerback, and he tells his story, his experiences in the NFL. Some of the players he played with, like Deion Sanders and Troy Aikman, and the author is a real smart guy, and he talks. This is the reality, what guys go through, the physical health problems that they have, and then some of the issues with medications or painkillers, which can be controversial, especially helping a guy who's hurt to play by deadening the pain, and what's that doing to his health? So many of these fellows, they have serious health problems because of NFL football is so hard on them. The next book is A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, 1843. Yeah, this is a real old book, and I read it out loud to the students at Resalest. This iconic character, Ebenezer Scrooge, is a mean old guy who gets a chance to change his ways with the help of some ghosts. And Tiny Tim's life is saved. Tiny Tim, I think, was this poor sick boy. And there's a famous quote, "God bless us, everyone." So this is good. This guy had been was an old guy, and he had worked, but he hadn't really cared about people, and I think he was a wealthy man, and so he was able to redeem himself before death, which we shouldn't wait too long before we try to do good in this world. Try to be a good person and help others. Wonderful story. The next book is Joy in Mudville by Greg Mitchell, 2000. This is a Little League memoir. This is baseball for young people, for boys in America. And I was reading it on the eve of Tim's LaSalle baseball season. Anyway, in the story, the team wins the championship, and it has fathers and sons and other kids and other fathers, competition, having fun at the same time. See, that's the right way. So this is a topic that's dear to my heart, because I like sports. But you don't want it to be, of course they play games and there are scores, but the main thing is to enjoy it, for it to be enjoyable, not the winning and losing of the games, is to have positive experiences with friends, with teammates, and to develop your skills as a player. And I think it helps for the development of children. But it can be problematic, especially if the adults get carried away with the competitive aspect and being too hard on the boys. The next book is All Alone by Claire Hutchett Bishop, 1953. I believe this is a children's book. Two boys, it's a real old one actually. Two boys in the French Alps, so this would be in France, taking care of cows in the summer, develop a forbidden friendship. I think they came from rival communities where there was this has to do with ethnic problems, and so they weren't supposed to be friends from the other village. But since I guess they met in taking care of these cows in the mountains, and in the story they teach the adults how to work together, and it's very touching. Sometimes children have more wisdom than adults because they don't hate each other, and these are just two boys, and they did help the adults in the story to get along. So it's a real good, very touching, wonderful story. The next book is Incredible Animal Adventures by Gene Craighead George, 1994. Wonderful book. I read it out loud to the students. It has these famous animals like Smokey the Bear, Long Distance Kitty, and a horse helping with a railroad, and a talking gorilla. Wow. So the wonderful author Gene Craighead George, who wrote all these books dealing with the natural world. The next book is Bump and Run by Mike Lupica, 2000. This is another NFL book about a fictional team. Jack Malloy inherits an NFL team, the New York Hawks. Of course, they don't exist. This is fictional. And this guy inherits the team from his father, and despite opposition, he wins the Super Bowl in his first year. So this is some NFL fiction by the famous Mike Lupica. The next book is Summer Reading is Killing Me, The Time Warp Trio by John Ziska, 1998. I read this out loud to the students, and In this book, characters from children's stories come to life, like Julie of the Wolves, Long John Silver, and Winnie the Pooh. Very creative. Good job by this wonderful author, John Ciesiska. The next book is The Nutcracker by E.T.A. Hoffman, adapted by Janet Schulman, 1816 and then 1979. I also read this out loud to the students, and it's an interesting book, Toys versus Mice. The character named Marie, she falls in love with the homely Nutcracker, who becomes a handsome prince, and they live together in Toyland. So this is sort of a fantasy book for children. Very nice, wonderful. The next book is The Magic Finger by Roald Dahl, 1966. I also read this out loud to students in Resalest. In the story, there's a family who enjoy hunting and killing animals. And they are turned into birds. Well, somehow. This is like sort of a fantasy. And they're turned into birds by a little girl's magic finger, so that they can learn to be sympathetic with animals. So I guess they, as birds, they learn. Of course, they could get shot and killed by hunters as birds. So this is very important. This is a good thing to care about animals. People have been so cruel to each other, but animals as well. So things need to change. We need to evolve, become more humane. That's why you see these vegans who won't eat any meat or even animal products because they feel sorry for the pigs and even the cows, the way the cows are treated, even if they're milking them, and chickens, so forth. The next book is Catch That Pass by Matt Christopher, 1969. Yeah, this Matt Christopher is the tremendous children's book author about sports books. In this book, the character Jim Nardi is a linebacker who likes to tackle and make hits, but he's afraid to intercept and get hits. As soon as you, if you're on defense, you like this position, you're trying to tackle guys. So he was afraid if he intercepted the ball, he'd get tackled. He didn't like that. However, in the story, he overcomes his fear and becomes a hero. So very good, wonderful. The next book is Grace's Letter to Lincoln by Peter and Connie Roop, 1998. I also read this out loud to the students. It's a true story, wonderful story. A little girl wrote a letter to Abraham Lincoln, who was President of the United States, elected in 1860, took office in 1861. And, oh boy, she suggested that he grow a beard. She thought he'd look more handsome. He was kind of a homely fellow. And she was also against hoping that slavery would end. And so anyway, he took her advice. He read the letter, and he did decide to grow this beard. And of course, he was the president during the Civil War, which ended up the Union won the war, the North won the war, and slavery was ended. So this is a very important history book, historical novel for children. The next book is Ricky Ricotta's Giant Robot versus the Voodoo Vultures from Venus by Dav Pilkey, 2001. Yeah, this is another children's book for younger children by Dav Pilkey, the creator of Captain Underpants. And once again, Ricky and his giants save the world and defeat evil villains from outer space. Really, really good. Well, it appears we're out of time. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you find a good book to read. God bless you, and see you next time.